If you want to make a texture display on top of another texture by drawing, we can do this in Blender by using a simple texture painting technique and the power of masks. Masks in Blender operate in black and white with the exception of RGB masks, which I'll show you how to make in a future tutorial. As it's a custom made node, on a texture, if you were to paint in completely black and completely white, black and white will represent the two shaders or textures you want to mix. This will make a lot more sense once we start mixing the textures. First of all, I'm going to set up my nodes and add my textures, which you can find in the description below. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up my workspace. So I'm going to left click and drag this timeline here and change it by clicking this clock icon to the shader editor. Then I'm going to left click on my cube and press plus new. Now you can see here we have a principal BSDF, which is a type of shader, and a material output. If you're curious as to what a shader is, you can watch this video here, which I made as part of my texture basics course. I'll press shift A and then I'm going to left click the search bar and search for mix RGB. This will allow us to mix two textures together. I'll then plug my color into the base color. If I left click this material preview here, you notice when I change one of these colors, it will change the color here. And what's essentially happening here is a mixture between color 1, which is blue, and color 2, which is white, which is creating this light blue color. If I change my factor to 0, which is represented with black, we will see just the color 1. If I change my factor to 1, which is represented with the color white on a mask, we can see just the color 2. But we want to replace color 1 and color 2 with our textures. So I'll change my factor back down to 0.5. So from the file you can download in the description below, or if you want you can use your own textures. I'm just going to drag and drop my textures in. For me, I've chosen this wooden base color and this brick base color. To start with, I'll plug my wood base color into color 1, and I'm going to plug my brick base color into color 2. We can leave the rest of the settings on these image textures as is, and you'll notice when I turn this factor down, the first color is going to be that wood, and the second color is going to be the brick. But you can notice the bricks there look a bit small, and I also want the wood to be a bit bigger as well. So to do this, I'm going to do a very basic and easy UV unwrap. I'll come to the top left hand corner just so I can show you what's happening. I'll drag that out and I'm going to change this viewport here to the UV editor. Now if I left click this, you can see we can choose one of our images to see how texture is being displayed. This is an optional thing though, you don't have to do this. Now I'm going to press in my 3D viewport, I'm going to left click my object, press tab to go into edit mode, and now when I press A, you can see that this has appeared here. This is Blender's default cube UV unwrap. And you can see it looks like a foldable dice. You can stick with this, or you can do what I like to do, which is a cube projection, which is perfect for this. Now I want to change this to a different one, where we have each square covering the entire texture. So to do that, we'll use a cool built-in feature in Blender called the cube projection. So press U, which will open up my unwrap menu, and I want to left click cube projection. Now you can see each one of these squares is now being scaled to the same size, and it's been rotated at certain points as well. Now I'm going to press tab to come back into object mode, and I'm just going to left click and drag this just to make this window bigger again. When I change my factor here, you can see we can switch between the brick and the factor. Although it seems to be using the UV coordinates by default, we're going to make sure we do things properly. In my shader editor, I'm going to press shift A, then under input, I'm going to left click texture coordinate, and I'll plug in my UV coordinates into the vector of both of these image textures. I can also press shift A, then under vector I can left click the mapping node, and now I can have even more control over my textures. The reason I've done this is just so I can change the scale. So I'm going to left click and drag down and change my scale to 0.5. There, now we've got a nice brick and wood scale. That's great, but how do we get a custom blend between these two materials? Well, to do that, we're going to need to create a new image texture. So I'll press shift A, then under texture, I'm going to left click image texture. If I press plus new and I make this color completely black, I want you to have a guess as to which image will show when I plug this into the factor. Keep in mind that black represents the number 0. If you guessed wood, you were correct, but if you didn't get it, no worries. Now I'm going to quickly plug in the UV texture coordinate into the vector. I'm going to left click this and I'm going to name it factor. I'm also going to change my color space to non-color, since it's going to be a non-color image. Now as you can see, my node layout is looking a little messy here, so I'm going to organize things a little bit. I'll drag these down, and then I'm going to shift select these textures here and this mapping node, and I'll press Ctrl J. Now we've got a nice little box to keep these things together. On the side here, there's a menu. To open this, you press N. I'm going to change the label here to textures. And now it's nice and organized. So let's go ahead and start painting this factor mask. In our 3D viewport, I'm going to change from object mode into texture paint. Now you'll notice where I paint white, the brick is going to start coming through. To get a visual representation of what's happening, I'll plug my colour of the factor into the surface. Now you can see what I've done is I've painted some white. Because this shade is closer to white, more of the brick, which is represented with 1 on colour 2, is going to start coming through, which is represented with 1 on the factor, or colour 2, is going to start coming through. If I was to change this strength here to 1, that would mean if I click this, and as you can see, the value is at 1, which means a complete white colour, and I paint, when I plug my shader back into the surface, you can see we've got the brick there clearly. So you see it can be quite fun just to sit here and do some painting. Now that works great, but as you can see, it's repeating it across the entire cube. So to do anything different, we would have to use a different type of UV unwrap. I'm going to keep that one just now, and I'm going to go back into object mode, press Shift D, and press G and X. Then I'm going to pan over to this one here, zoom in, and I'm going to drag out that UV editor menu again. I'll press Tab to go into edit mode. Now if I press A, U, and this time I'm going to do Smart UV Project. I'm going to give it a slight island margin of about 0.02. If I go back into object mode, you can see things looking a little messed up, and that's because I'm going to want to use a brand new mask for this one. But if I was to edit this material by, for example, removing this factor material, you would see it does it on the other cube. And that's because these are sharing the same material. So if I put this back onto factor, I'm now going to left click my first one, and I'm going to change its name from material 1 to cube 1. And I'm going to change the second one by first left clicking this button to duplicate the material, and then I'll rename it to cube 2. It's important that you duplicate it, otherwise you'll just be renaming the material we just renamed. Now I'm going to zoom into my textures and turn down the scale a little bit. I'm going to change the scale to 2. And now you can see we got something a bit bigger. As you can see, brick textures work best with a cube projection, so I would recommend baking your procedural brick material onto a Smart UV unwrap, like we've done for this cube here. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, this mask we've made here will actually need to be saved, since it won't be saved into the Blender file. I'll left click this image with a star beside it, then Save As, and you can just choose a place in your computer to save it. Once you've done that, your image will now be safe. Now coming back to our second cube, I'm going to drag and drop another texture, which you'll find in the download below. This one is called Brick Base Color Smart UV, since we're using a Smart UV map. So I'll just drag and drop that into there. Just to show you what I'm doing, I'm just going to left click this brick base color here, making sure we've selected the right cube, press X, and I'll drag this Smart UV into here. I'll plug my vector into vector, and my color into color 2. As you can see though, we still have issues, and that's because our scale on the vector is still set to 2. So I'm going to left click scale, quickly drag down, and set it to 1. Seems that the margin hasn't quite lined up properly. So to fix that, I'm just going to UV unwrap it again. So I'll press Tab, Edit, U, Smart UV Project, and this time I'm going to change it from 0.2 to 0.04. This doesn't look perfect since I did rush this texture bake here, but it will do nicely for now. I'm also going to press X on my factor here because we're going to create a new texture for this. Now we'll press plus new again, and I'll call this one factor 2. Then I'll drag this across to make some more space, and I'll go into texture paint mode. Now before we even start texture painting, we will need to make sure we select the right texture here, because if we were to start painting now, it would start painting on top of one of our textures here. So I'm going to left click our factor 2 image texture, and then we can start painting. And now you can see what it's doing. So I could put a multitude of patterns on here, maybe I could put even a smiley face. And if I wanted to make a more hard edges, although usually I like to use soft edges, I can change the fall off to this square one here, and now you can see it's creating a really hard look there. So there's loads of things you can do with this, but this makes for a good introduction. This mixing can also work with shaders. As you can see in this example I done for the thumbnail, we are mixing two shaders with our mask. Shaders using multiple textures and parameters creates a really cool effect. To learn more about masks, you can check out this video, and for more on shaders, I recommend this one. These are both part of my Texture Basics course, which is a great way to improve your understanding of procedural materials and textures inside a Blender. If you want to have a look at these shaders I've made, the Blender file for this project will also be in the download below. But yeah, with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for watching, and if you did enjoy, please make sure to share the video with a friend and subscribe for more. Apart from that though, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know in the comments below, and with that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care!